But what happened on January the 1st this year was the entire regulation of Britain's biggest industry was handed over to 3 new European regulatory authorities under the control of a rather charming Frenchman called Michel Barnier, who's the commissioner, but a man who says he wants to get rid of our Anglo-Saxon methods in the City of London. The challenge is perfectly clear, because in 2010, just in that 1 year, 1 in 4 hedge funds left the City of London as a direct result of a new European directive and the whole tax regime in this country. Just that one industry alone, the hedge fund industry, paid 5.3 billion sterling in corporation tax to the British Exchequer in 2009. 20% of the entire tax take for this country comes from the City of London, and Mr Cameron, quite happily, with his MEPs being 3-line whipped, along with the Lib Dems and Labour Party, have given away control of Britain's biggest industry. And our message to the City, and my message to you tonight, is that we have got to get back control of Britain's biggest industry. We've got to be the masters of our own destiny. And the future, our economic future as a trader, isn't going to be European, for goodness sake. You know, Europe last year accounted for 18% of the gross domestic product of the globe. It is estimated, in this age of globalisation, that by 2020, that will have fallen to 8 or 9%. Our economic future is going to be as a global trading nation, not just as a little European trading nation. And yet, what we're signed up to... Now, again, I apologise to the younger people, because we're discussing ancient history here. But there was a referendum, of course, back in 1975. So anybody in this room over the age of 54 would have qualified to vote in that referendum, and I can see 1 or 2 of you that probably do qualify for that. What you were told was that you were joining a common market. It was just about free trade. What you weren't told is that actually what you were joining was a customs union. And that what membership of that union meant is that you weren't just bound by the rules within the club, you were also bound with the rules without the club. Here we are, the world's 5th biggest trading nation, with the benefits of the English language, with the benefits of our merchanting history and background, with the benefits of the city, with the benefits of being in the middle of the world's trading time zone. Here we are, banned, forbidden from making our own trade relationships with any other country in the world because we're part of this EU. And the really positive message for trade and for Britain's future is free from the clutches of this thing. We will be able to negotiate our own trade deals around the globe, and wouldn't it be quite a good starting place to look at our own Commonwealth, that remarkable organisation of people who share with us, in nearly every case, a language, a legal system and a shared history. Wouldn't it make sense for us to branch out to Australia, to Canada, to New Zealand, to India, and all those amazing opportunities that await Britain around the world? And I think it's that message, it's that positive global message that is increasingly seeing the 18 to 24-year-olds in this country coming around and saying, we're going out and we are going to vote UKIP. But perhaps the biggest benefit of us being freed from this current political situation, perhaps the biggest benefit is the one that is the most difficult to define. You see, I think that when we have an issue like votes for prisoners, now, I mean, I have a view on that. My own view is that if you go to prison, you forfeit for that period of time, not just your liberty, but your democratic rights as well. That's my view. And wouldn't it have been extraordinary if in the recent Barnsley by-election, Eric Ilsley, who'd just been put in prison for fraud, had been able to vote in that by-election? I mean, you know, that rather sums it up to me. So I have a view that prisoners shouldn't get the vote. But actually, what we think, isn't what matters. What matters is that we should be able to make that decision in our own country. When a British Prime Minister says it makes him sick to the bottom of his stomach that we have to give prisoners the vote, but that sadly there's nothing we can do, I think that says something about us as a nation. It says something about our self-confidence. It says something about our self-respect. It says something about our pride. It says to me, we've sunk to rock bottom. And then a few weeks later, there was a debate in the House of Commons over the increase on VAT on fuel. The Labour proposal that we should reduce VAT on fuel. And what was extraordinary was to see the government boasting to the Labour Party, we can't do this because European rules say we can't. No, 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 no. I mean, this is unbelievable. We have a British government from a dispatch box boasting that they can't do anything. And when 222 members of Parliament vote against votes for prisoners and only 34 vote for votes for prisoners, and the whole thing doesn't amount to a row of beans because all they've done is to demonstrate their own impotence, unlike some Italian politicians, but that's another story. Sorry, I was trying to keep it serious, but it is difficult. But I mean, that's what we've sunk to, and I think, and I believe, that the biggest single benefit of freeing ourselves from this union that is humbling and hobbling our leaders and our country, I think the biggest benefit of all is we will regain our sense of pride, self-respect, our sense of who we are as a people, our sense of pride in what those went before us were prepared to sacrifice and give so that we could live in a free, democratic nation. And perhaps above all, what it will give us is a sense of optimism that we can hand on to our children and our grandchildren the kind of freedoms that we inherited. I put it to you folks, that is worth fighting for. Thank you.
Nigel, that was excellent. I'm going to now throw this open to the audience, so if any of you want to ask questions, please address the table and I will ask Nigel to answer them. So, the gentleman with the blue and white stripe.
Good evening, Nigel. Brian Mooney, pleased to meet you again. I think that UKIP could get a lot more support if it pushed on two policies. One, energy, because under EU policies our lights are going to go out in a few years' time. And secondly, this week there was an EU transport white paper out which is pushing for road pricing for all vehicles everywhere. I think UKIP would do very well to highlight those. What do you think UKIP could do?
Well, very interesting. On road pricing and transport, do you remember about 4 years ago there was a government document that floated the idea that perhaps what had happened on the M6 was a good idea and should be extended across the country? And do you remember there was one of those online petitions was set up to oppose road pricing, led by a chap from Birmingham called Peter Roberts, who I'm pleased to say is a UKIP member, and they got 1.8 million signatures in 5 days, which just goes to show that all of us that drive a motor car have just about had enough of the amount of tax we've got to pay, the amount of road duty we've got to pay. So I agree with you. That is a hot issue, and we must make our position very clear on it. On energy policy, look, Brian, I'd say this to you. I don't think we could have been any clearer on energy policy than where we stand. I have to say to you that I think the building of these windmills, whether it is onshore or offshore, is just about the biggest con I think I've seen in my lifetime. It is complete and utter madness. Do you know in Germany, who got the green bug, I mean, by the way, can I just lay my cards on the table. I voted Green in the '89 European elections. You know, I want us to control pollution. I want us to look after the environment. What I don't want is this new lunacy that poses as green. Now, the Germans got this disease before us, and they have now constructed 22,000 wind turbines in Germany. In fact, if you drive across Schleswig-Holstein, you can barely see the sky. There are so many wind turbines there. But of course, what's the point of building 22,000 wind turbines when the peak demand for electricity comes in January or February, where very often there's a great big anticyclone sitting over the North Sea with fog and frost, and not one of the 22,000 turns. So as a result of that, the Germans are currently constructing, I kid you not, 15 new coal-fired power stations because they have to have the backup when wind energy doesn't work. So the net effect on CO2 emissions is, of course, that the building of all these wind farms and the building of all the new coal-fired power stations mean that CO2 emissions have increased, and the effect of all of this on ordinary people, I doubt many people in this room know, and perhaps we must campaign more clearly on this, that across the UK at the moment, every single one of you is paying an extra 14% on your electricity bill directly to subsidise this so-called renewable obligation that we've signed up to with the European Union. So we have done DVDs and videos on this. I suspect one of our next big national campaigns is we will quantify exactly what it is costing the average family in terms of increased airline tickets for their couple of weeks in Benidorm, in terms of their electricity bills, and we must point out that the climate change bill that went through the House of Commons is the single most expensive piece of legislation that has ever been passed by a British government and is currently costing us £18 billion a year. It's likely to cost that for the next 30 years, and yet, just to show how beautifully in touch our politicians are, only 3 members of Parliament voted against it.
If I may say something to add to this, we have concerns in this country regarding wildlife protection. Isn't there a grave danger that wildlife will be damaged as a result of these turbines? And where do we come in with wildlife in all this?
Well, I think on one of the more controversial press releases that I put out, or Gwaine put out in my name, I think we described wind turbines as bird mincers. So, yeah, I mean, one of the environmentalists that I've got great respect for is David Bellamy, and David Bellamy has campaigned against wind farms all over this country, whether they're onshore or offshore, on the basis that they are very bad for migrating birds. It is just yet another reason that says to us we must turn our backs on this lunacy. And recently, in my home county of Kent, the biggest offshore wind farm in the country was opened off Thanet. And you know, the firm that built that already have a guaranteed subsidy from the government of £1.2 billion over the next 20 years. No wonder Nick Clegg's wife is a non-executive director of one of the wind turbine companies.
And isn't it true to say that
Sorry,
wind turbine...
I think we'll give somebody else a chance. Thank you.